Hi, I'm Keely. I'm part of Retirement Dreams to Reality, and this video is going to be about all the factors that I take into account when I plan our slow travel. A huge part of our retirement is going to be the slow travel that we've got planned. We're planning to do at least 2 to 3 months in 3 or 4 different countries. So we're planning to do 2 to 3 months in the USA, 2 to 3 months in Australia, 2 to 3 months in various places in Europe, and then 2 to 3 months back home. Now, even though we're not travelling for 6 years, I have lots and lots of factors that I take into account while I'm planning this travel. The first factor, which is huge for me, is the climate and weather. And I say climate and weather because not only do we want it to be hot, but also we want it to be relatively dry. There's no point going to a really nice hot place if literally we get there and it's raining every day. So I use various websites, one called Weather and Climate, and I'll post that in the link below. And I use another one called World Weather Online. And generally they just do graphs. So it will show you a graph of the daily temperatures for the month, and it will show you a graph of rainfall. So these are annual graphs. What's the weather in certain areas at certain times of the year? The next thing that I've been focusing on recently is visa requirements. So obviously most people know that a lot of countries allow you to go there for 90 days as part of any basic travel, tourist visa, visa waiver. There are specific rules as well. For the USA, on a visa ESTA waiver, you can travel for 90 days within any 180 days. And generally, all of the websites that you look at say you have to be out of the country longer than you're in the country. So if you travel for 89 days, be back at home or in another country by 92 days. That's sort of the rule of thumb. Now, where do I get this information from? Most of the information I get from that government website. So I look at the USA government website, which we'll link below. For Australia, I look at the Australian government's website, which we'll link below. The Schengen region, the EU, is slightly different now, and they lump Europe as one area. So you can't go to Greece for 90 days and then go to Portugal for 90 days. You can go to Greece for 60 days and then go to Portugal for 20 days. And there's information, lots of information about that on the UK government website. Basically, when I look at visa requirements, I look at the government websites for our country and for the country that we're planning to go to. There's lots of YouTubers that give you information on this, particularly the Schengen rule, and there's lots of other websites, TripAdvisor, places like that will give you information. What I would say is check on the government website for the real specific facts, because they're the most important. And obviously I'll be doing that just before we go again. I'm not checking now and then in 5 years' time just assuming it's the same, because things change all the time. Another factor that I've had to take into account is the language and the culture. Now, that might not be such an issue for people watching this. I absolutely love the European culture. I could live in Nice or Carcassonne tomorrow, but Bruce can't. Bruce struggles not knowing the language.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je t'appelle Lou.
Huh. All right, let's just try it again.
Hey.
Really listen.
Got it.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te floop flee.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Oh, de fouf.
He struggles being out of his comfort zone, and that's important. It's important. If we're going to live somewhere for 2 to 3 months, you've got to feel comfortable. So as much as some people might think that's a bad thing and you're supposed to go and immerse yourself in the culture, we're old enough to know what we like and what we don't like, and that's a factor for us. The next thing that's really important, as I talked about before, is our non-negotiables. So when I'm looking at where we want to go, I generally look at beachside or lakeside towns and cities. So I've already looked at the weather. It's got to be warm. I know I want to be near a beach. That's really, really important for me. And for Bruce, he wants to be near a gym. Now, luckily, we are in such an age where you can find anything on the internet, absolutely anything. So I can locate a place on Google Maps, and within half an hour, I can find at least 2 or 3 gyms that would be suitable for Bruce. And that's in Greece or Australia. I can join the Facebook group for that gym. I can look at membership plans for that gym. And the same goes for looking at if cities are walkable, looking at what the beaches are like. Another thing that not only will factor in whether we go to this place, but it factors in the order that we'll go to this place is transit costs. Now, by that, I mean the travel to that location. For example, if it's cheaper to go from the UK to America than it is to go from Australia to America, then we might come home first for a couple of months when we've done Australia, rather than go straight to the USA.
Do you hear that, Doug? I'm coming to London. Heavy. Shut up and sit down, you big...
Anything to declare?
Yeah, don't go to England.
Now, the main way that we're going to transition from one place to another is we're going to fly most of the time, but we're also looking at repositioning cruises. Now, first of all, flights, I have 2 go-to sites that I use all the time, which are Skyscanner and Kayak. I don't necessarily book through Skyscanner and Kayak, but I use them as a guide. Another thing that we do when we book flights, we use reward points. And we're going to do another video about Bruce's credit card hack. A lot of the flights we book, we'll book direct with Virgin and we'll book direct with British Airways because we've got reward points. But the final thing that we're really looking at that we've not done yet are repositioning cruises. Now, this is where a cruise relocates from one continent to another. So therefore, the cruise is just one way. And typically, these cruises work out very, very, very inexpensive. It can be a similar price for the cruise as it would be for the one-way flight ticket. But that cruise includes your accommodation for anything from 2 weeks to a month, and it includes all of your food and drink, assuming you don't drink alcohol, which we don't, for the duration of the cruise. I look at Cruise Critic, something called Cruise Plum, and I generally look at other YouTubers' advice on repositioning cruises. So we'll also do a video on repositioning cruises when we nail down our specifics. But that was the transit. That's another factor that I have to take into account. The second to last thing, but one of the most important things, is accommodation. The cost of the accommodation and the availability. The accommodation costs for us are at least 30 to 40%, sometimes 50% of our annual budget. So this is a huge factor. When we go to Australia, we look at certain places where the accommodation might be a little bit cheaper than other places. The same in America. So we won't be going to Clearwater in Florida, but we may be going somewhere in Florida where the accommodation is a little bit cheaper. But it's not just about cost, it's also about availability. Generally, the more availability of the accommodation, then the cheaper it will be. Now, I, like many, many other people, use Airbnb. Airbnb is a huge one for me. I've got loads of wish lists. I've got places saved already in Maroochydore, in Padre Island, in various places in Texas, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I use it as a store, really, for the time being. I save lots of different accommodations for lots of different places, and Airbnb is a really, really good go-to. But that's not our only go-to. There's a site called Vrbo, VRBO, and I've used that quite a lot in America. But another thing that we're considering is trusted house sitters. We're considering doing like dog sitting, pet sitting for people in various countries. So that will cut down on accommodation costs. And we're also considering house swap, doing some sort of house swap when we've got our little house in Beverley. Now, we haven't investigated those yet, and our budget is based on us paying for accommodation, but they're just something that we're going to have up our sleeve. And once again, we'll link all of the things: Airbnb, Vrbo, trusted house sitters, house swaps. We'll link all of those in the link below. As I say, there's some we haven't investigated, and there are some that I know an awful lot about. Occasionally, we'll be doing 1-2 nights in hotels, and I use booking.com, but I'm looking at using some other sites that give you credits and rewards for the more nights you spend. I think hotels.com is one of those. Over the next few years, I will fine tune that research. And the last thing that we take into account, but definitely not least, is safety. Safety of the area. I'm on a Facebook page called Solo Women Travellers, and I've been using that as a bit of a guide. If women feel perfectly safe to go there on their own, then the chances are that Bruce and I will be okay. Now, we don't want to go off the beaten track anyway, so we don't have any huge worries. But my very first port of call when I'm looking at the safety of an area is the UK government's website, because they have lots of information about whether they think it's safe for a person to travel to an area or not. I also look at the government of the country that I'm going to. America do crime statistics for every state, every borough, every area in that state, every town in that state. So I can see that Myrtle Beach has a very low crime rate compared to, for example, areas of Los Angeles. Generally, a lot of the places that we're looking at really don't have any issues with crime rate at all. It's nice to check that out. And once again, it'll be checks that I do again before we go in the 6 years, before we book anything. So that's all of the factors that I take into account when we first start thinking of whether an area is going to be suitable for us or not. Now, your factors might be very different, but things like accommodation, transit costs, safety, weather, things like that are probably just as important to you as they are to us. Thanks for watching. Our next video is going to be on what's the difference between holidaying and slow travel. Hope you find that useful. Take care.